Hello, and welcome to English for Philosophy students. Today we are in lesson number 33, I believe. Yes. And we are in the second lesson of rule number 5, which is don't let your children do things that make you not like them. Let us begin where we left off last week. Let me see if this works. Yes. I'm going to begin reading right here. When my now adult daughter was a child, another child once hit her on the head with a heavy metal toy truck. I watched that same child 1 year later viciously push his younger sister backwards over a fragile, glass-surfaced coffee table. His mother picked him up immediately afterwards, but not her frightened daughter, and told him in hushed tones not to do such things, while she patted him comfortingly in a manner clearly indicative of approval. She was out to produce a little God Emperor of the universe. That's the unstated goal of many a mother, including many who consider themselves advocates for full gender equality. Such women will object vociferously to any command uttered by an adult male, but will trot off in seconds to make their progeny a peanut butter sandwich if he demands it, while immersed self-importantly in a video game. Hold on. The future mates of such boys have every reason to hate their mothers-in-law. Respect for women, that's for other boys, other men, not for their dear sons. Hold on. Okay, this is easy to understand, so we will not spend much time. When my now adult daughter was a child, so this is 20 years ago, he saw another child hit his daughter with a heavy metal toy truck. That same child also pushed his younger sister backwards over a fragile glass-surfaced coffee table, and the mother picked up the boy who pushed the girl and said, "Oh, don't do that," ignoring her daughter who had been pushed. The mother was favoring the boy, and she was saying, "Don't do that," but she was acting like he was the victim and needed comfort. This mother was producing, This mother was producing a monster, basically. And Jordan Peterson says it is ironic that a mother who is a feminist and doesn't believe adult men should ever be able to command, yet will obey the commands of her son. The future mate, the wife of this boy in the future, should hate her mother-in-law because the mother-in-law created the monster. The mother who may be a feminist is not being consistent. She is not teaching her son to have respect for women. Next paragraph. Something of the same sort. So we are going to have another example of the same phenomenon. Something of the same sort may underlie, in part, the preference for male children seen most particularly in places such as India, Pakistan, and China, where sex-selective abortion is widely practiced. The same sort. In what sense is this same? A woman who claims to be a feminist, yet raises her son to be a male chauvinist. In the same way, in other countries, well, actually, we haven't read enough to understand a direct correlation here. So let's read the whole thing before comments. Sorry about that. Okay, same sort may underlie, in part, the preference for male children. So up here they're preferring the male child. Maybe that's the same sort. Preference for male children is the thing that is same sort. So, in places like India, Pakistan, and China, where sex-selective abortion is widely practiced. The Wikipedia entry for that practice attributes its existence to cultural norms favoring male over female children. I cite Wikipedia because it is collectively written and edited, and therefore the perfect place to find accepted wisdom. But there's no evidence that such ideas are strictly cultural. There are plausible psychobiological reasons for the evolution of such an attitude, and they're not pretty from a modern egalitarian perspective. If circumstances force you to put all your eggs into one basket, so to speak, a son is a better bet by the strict standards of evolutionary logic, where the proliferation of your genes is all that matters. Why? Okay, let's read the whole thing again. Something of the same sort may underlie in part the preference for male children, seen most particularly in places like this with sex-selective abortion. So up here, we see women who favor their sons. Down here, we see preference for male children. And the question is, why? What is the cause of this preference? And he is simply suggesting that whatever the cause is, maybe it is the same cause. Wikipedia is a good source for accepted wisdom because it is collectively written and edited. This means many people are involved in writing and refining the information on Wikipedia. Therefore, what is in Wikipedia reflects broad consensus. Okay? So if you want to know what many people think, look at Wikipedia. It is not like a book written by one person with his thoughts. Wikipedia is written and edited by the masses. So, Wikipedia says that favoring boys is due to cultural norms. But Jordan Peterson says there is no evidence that cultural norms are the cause of favoring male children. No evidence for that. No evidence that such ideas are strictly cultural. That means purely cultural. There is probably a biological reason, is what Jordan Peterson is saying. He says there are plausible, which means believable, psychobiological reasons for the evolution of preference for male children. That's the attitude. Preference for your male child. And they're not pretty. That phrase is used to describe something that is repugnant. Repugnant. Something we hate. These psychobiological reasons for preferring men are not pretty from a modern egalitarian perspective. So people who are modern, egalitarian feminists, they hate certain kinds of ideas. Well, the biological reason for preferring males would be repugnant to an egalitarian modern person. He now tells us or begins to tell us what these biological reasons are. If circumstances force you to put all your eggs into one basket. This is a phrase that we use commonly in America, in the United States. We say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. There's a story that illustrates this. In the story, you have a girl who is poor, and she lives by selling eggs from her chickens at the market. And one day she gets a lot of eggs, more than usual. And instead of packaging them separately, she just puts them all in one basket. She has a huge basket. And she's off to market to sell her eggs. And she is thinking of all the things she will buy with so many eggs. And because she is thinking, she is not looking at her feet. And she trips over a rock and falls. And all of the eggs are broken. And the moral is, don't put all your eggs in one basket. Rather, in your life, you should have, for example, if you have money, invest it in a diversified portfolio. Put some money in gold and some money in the stocks, some money in real estate. Don't put all your eggs in one basket, because then if that falls, you'll have nothing left. So when he uses this, it's a bit of a joke, because he means both this culturally understood phrase, don't put all your eggs in one basket, don't put all your hope in one investment, and also biologically, if you have eggs, this is your genetic deposit. This is your hope of immortality, your hope to have descendants. So it's a joke. If circumstances force you to put all your eggs in one basket. So, in fact, we as humans are forced to put all of our hope for descendants into one basket. That is the hope of having children. So he says, so to speak, because it's a joke. A son is a better bet, a better investment, by the strict standards of evolutionary logic, where the proliferation of your genes is all that matters. So if you can only have one child, you are going to put all of your eggs in one basket. You are going to invest everything you have, your full genetic deposit, into one carrier. Better it should be a son than a daughter. Why? Well, here's the answer to the question. A reproductively successful daughter might gain you 8 or 9 children. The Holocaust survivor Yida Schwartz, a star in this regard, had 3 generations of direct descendants. Hold on. Who matched such performance. She was the ancestor of almost 2,000 people by the time of her death in 2010. 3 generations. 2,000 people. Is that right? 3 generations? Yeah. 3 generations. 2,000 people. That's a lot. But the sky is truly the limit with a reproductively successful son. Sex with multiple female partners is his ticket to exponential reproduction, given our species' practical limitation to single births. Rumor has it that actor Warren Beatty and the athlete Wilt Chamberlain each bedded multiple thousands of women, something not unknown as well among rock stars. They didn't produce children in those numbers. Modern birth control limits that, but similar celebrity types in the past have done so. The forefather of the Qing dynasty, Geokanga, circa 1550, for example, is the male line ancestor of 1.5 million people in northeastern China. The medieval Uynil dynasty produced up to 3 million male descendants, localized mainly in northwestern Ireland and the United States through Irish immigration. And the king of them all, Genghis Khan, conqueror of much of Asia, is the forefather of 8% of the men in Central Asia. 16 million male descendants, 34 generations later. So, from a deep biological perspective, there are reasons why parents might favor sons sufficiently to eliminate female fetuses, although I am not claiming direct causality, nor suggesting a lack of other, more culturally dependent reasons. Okay, in summary, the question is, by the standards of evolutionary logic, why might parents prefer a boy to a girl for a child? Answer: a reproductively successful daughter might gain you 8 or 9 children, and those 8 or 9 children are your hope. But a male can have sex with unlimited numbers of women, each of whom have children, and this provides for exponential growth. He mentioned several examples of historic figures who modern genetic analysis has shown to be the father of huge numbers of people, most notably Genghis Khan, who is the ancestor of 8% of the men in Central Asia, 16 million male descendants. So, from a deep biological perspective, there are reasons why a parent might prefer a male child. Remember in former chapters, Jordan Peterson talked about deep evolutionary conditioning from even before we were human, from the time when we were evolutionarily much more simple. He believes in that sort of thing. So he is not suggesting that this biological reason is the cause of sex selection, abortion, and preferring boys over girls. He is not suggesting this is the only cause. He is saying there may also be culturally dependent reasons, but the biology might have something to do with it. A culturally dependent reason might be that in your culture, boy children are responsible for taking care of you in your old age, and girl children go off and take care of the in-law parents. That would be an example of a cultural reason for preferring a boy child, if you could only have one, like in China. Okay, let us move on. Hold on. I'm trying to get my colors. Why do I have such trouble with this? I never know how to do it. Well, maybe we have to do without color for a while. Oh well. Okay, moving on. Preferential treatment awarded a son during development might even help produce an attractive, well-rounded, confident man. This happened in the case of the father of psychoanalysis, Sigmund Freud. Oh, look at that. In the case of Sigmund Freud, by his own account, quote, "A man who has been the indisputable favorite of his mother keeps for life the feeling of a conqueror. That confidence of success that often induces real success." Fair enough. But feeling a conqueror can all too easily become actual conqueror. Genghis Khan's outstanding reproductive success certainly came at the cost of any success whatsoever for others, including the dead millions of Chinese, Persians, Russians, and Hungarians. Spoiling a son might therefore work well from the standpoint of the selfish gene, allowing the favored child's genes to replicate themselves in innumerable offspring. To use the evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins' famous expression. But it can make for a dark, painful spectacle in the here and now, and mutate into something incredibly dangerous. Okay, let's look back. Try to get the main idea. Preferential treatment awarded a son during development, so if you prefer your son, might help produce an attractive, well-rounded, confident man. Maybe preferring your son makes him confident and attractive. Sigmund Freud says yes. Sigmund Freud says if you are a man who has been the favorite of your mother, you will keep for life the confidence of success that often induces real success. This is Sigmund Freud's opinion. Jordan Peterson says, fair enough. That means, okay, maybe. Maybe. But, Jordan Peterson says, so something different is coming. Jordan Peterson is not in favor of Sigmund Freud's advice to prefer your son. But the feeling of a conqueror can become actual conqueror. In other words, if you make your son feel like a tyrant, he may become a tyrant. Example, Genghis Khan's success came at the cost of dead millions. In other words, Genghis Khan was like a monster. Spoiling a son might work well from an evolutionary perspective. Spread your genes very wide. But it can make for a dark, painful spectacle in the here and now. In other words, yes, you may have innumerable offspring, but your own son will be a monster. He may become something very dangerous. I'm trying to get my color again. Go to blue. Moving on. None of this means that all mothers favor all sons over their daughters, or that daughters are not sometimes favored over sons, or that fathers don't sometimes favor their sons. Other factors can clearly dominate. Sometimes, for example, unconscious hatred, sometimes not so unconscious either, overrides any concern a parent might have for any child, regardless of gender or personality or situation. I saw a 4-year-old boy allowed to go hungry on a regular basis. His nanny had been injured and he was being cycled through the neighbors for temporary care. When his mother dropped him off at our house, she indicated that he wouldn't eat all day. "That's okay," she said. It wasn't okay, in case that's not obvious. This was the same 4-year-old boy who clung to my wife for hours in absolute desperation and total commitment when she tenaciously, persistently, and mercifully managed to feed him an entire lunch meal, rewarding him throughout for his cooperation and refusing to let him fail. He started out with a closed mouth, sitting with all of us at the dining room table, my wife and I, our 2 kids, and 2 neighborhood kids we looked after during the day. She put the spoon in front of him, waiting patiently, persistently, while he moved his head back and forth, refusing at entry, using defensive methods typical of a recalcitrant, none too well attended 2-year-old. Now we're going to stop here and go back to the beginning of the paragraph, but I will point out that this is not really a break. We probably should have stopped sooner and then taken the whole story of this kid all at once. But let us look at the beginning of this paragraph, and we will get the main idea, and then we will see what the example is. So we'll have our thesis and we'll have our support. So first we'll have our thesis. This will be where it is. Hold on. Okay, so remember what happened earlier, up here. Okay, up here, we are talking about a tendency to prefer a son over a daughter for the sake of evolutionary advantage and other cultural advantages or reasons. Now, in this, he is moving to another possibility. So he says, none of this, meaning none of this stuff up here, means that all mothers favor all sons over daughters, or that all daughters are not sometimes favored over sons, or that fathers don't sometimes favor their sons. Other factors can clearly dominate. Sometimes, for example, unconscious hatred overrides any concern a parent might have for any child, regardless of gender, personality, or situation. So the thesis is, not all mothers favor their sons. Not all humans favor sons. There are as many patterns as there are families, very diverse, and sometimes you literally have hatred, not favoring. Then he moves into an example. an anecdote. And in the example, he talks about a little 4-year-old boy who was his nanny, the person who took care of him normally while his mother worked, was sick. So the boy was being babysat by neighbors in the neighborhood. And one day, the Peterson family agreed to take this boy and babysit him during the day. And the mother said, he will not eat all day, and that's okay. And the Petersons were like, no, he will eat. This boy clung to my wife for hours in absolute desperation and total commitment. Please, please keep me. After she managed to feed him an entire lunchtime meal. Managed to means it was hard. It was a difficult thing, but she succeeded. After she fed him, he clung to her. We have to wonder, what is this boy's family like if he behaves in this manner? So the wife fed him patiently, rewarded him when he would take a bite. He refused, but she waited and got the food in. And she didn't let him fail. She helped the boy succeed. The boy was a failure. He was always sad and alone and hungry. But this day he ate lunch and felt good. He succeeded. She helped him against his will to succeed. She patted him on the head every time he managed, difficult for him, to take a mouthful, telling him sincerely that he was a good boy when he did. Sincerely means she loved him and knew he was a good boy. She did think he was a good boy. When you have the did in there, it emphasizes it. She really, really thought, she did think he was a good boy. She didn't just say good boy. She really knew he was a good boy. That's from this word here. He was a cute, damaged kid. Cute meaning beautiful physically, damaged meaning his behavior showed that in his environment, bad things were happening to him. 10 not too painful minutes later, he finished his meal. We were all watching intently. It was a drama of life and death. Symbolically, if he loses his battle of will and is forced to eat, he will live. But if he wins his battle of will and refuses to eat consistently in his life, he will die. So symbolically, this one meal is life and death. And he must lose the battle of will in order to win the battle of life. Look, she said, holding up his bowl, you finished all of it. This boy, who was standing in the corner voluntarily and unhappily when I first saw him, who wouldn't interact with the other kids, who frowned chronically, who wouldn't respond to me when I tickled and prodded him, trying to get him to play, this boy broke immediately into a wide, radiant smile. It brought joy to everyone at the table. 20 years later, writing it down today, it still brings me to tears. Afterward, he followed my wife around like a puppy for the rest of the day, refusing to let her out of his sight. When she sat down, he jumped in her lap, cuddling in and opening himself back up to the world. searching desperately for the love he had been continually denied. Later in the day, but far too soon, his mother reappeared. She came down the stairs into the room we all occupied. "Oh, Supermom," she uttered resentfully, seeing her son curled up in my wife's lap. Then she departed, black, murderous heart unchanged, doomed child in hand. She was a psychologist. The things you can see, even with a single open eye. It's no wonder that people want to stay blind. Okay, let us just go back and finish this paragraph. "Look," she said, holding up the boy. "You finished the bowl. You finished it." She gave him sense of accomplishment. Okay, now we see a part where the boy, here, let me see if I can get this back. Let me get yellow. Okay. Okay, this is the character of the boy before he ate his lunch. He would stand in a corner voluntarily. Usually we make a child stand in the corner and isolate him as a punishment. This boy went straight to the corner and isolated himself. He was unhappy. He stood in the corner unhappily when I first saw him. This is the boy who wouldn't interact with the other kids. So he's lonely. He frowned chronically. Frown is this. Chronically means all the time, not just when a bad thing happens. This is the boy who wouldn't respond to me when I tickled and prodded him and tried to get him to play. A boy that you could not draw into play. This boy with this character broke immediately. Hold on, let me get back to my blue. Broke immediately into a wide, radiant smile that brought joy to everyone. And afterward, he followed my wife around like a puppy. This is an image we use often in English. Followed me around like a puppy. It is for a vulnerable, easily hurt animal that loves you no matter what you do and only wants you to love him. For the rest of the day, refusing to let her out of his sight. If she went into the bathroom, he would scream and cry, "Ah!" This is how babies are with their mothers for a few weeks, a small phase. This boy at age 4 was displaying this behavior for a stranger lady who had given him one meal. When she sat down, he jumped in her lap, cuddling in, opening himself back up to the world. Previously, he stood in a corner like this, but now he jumped and cuddled into the woman. Searching desperately for the love he had been continually denied. Later, but far too soon. In other words, it's too bad she had to come back. The mother reappeared and was resentful because another woman was loving her child. She said, "Supermom," in a resentful way. And then she took her child. And it was a tragedy. It's no wonder that people want to stay blind. People don't want to see. Because if you see what's happening, you think, what can I do? Maybe there's nothing I can do. So let's move on. Even though we don't have a lot of time, we can do a little bit more. Okay, let's just remind ourselves what the subtitle of all this was. The subtitle was, "It's Not Okay." That whole segment was about the fact that what is going on with children today is not okay. Okay, now we will move on. Everybody hates arithmetic. Our new section. My clinical clients frequently come to me to discuss their day-to-day familial problems. Such quotidian concerns are insidious. Their habitual and predictable occurrence makes them appear trivial, but that appearance of triviality is deceptive. It is the things that occur every single day that truly make up our lives. And time spent the same way over and over again adds up at an alarming rate. One father recently spoke with me about the trouble he was having putting his son to sleep at night, a ritual that typically involved about 3/4 of an hour of fighting. We did the arithmetic. 45 minutes a day, 7 days a week. That's 300 minutes, or 5 hours a week. 5 hours for each of the 4 weeks of a month. That's 20 hours per month. 20 hours a month for 12 months is 240 hours a year. That's a month and a half, or standard. That's a month and a half of standard 40-hour work weeks. My clinical clients, so these are people who have sought psychological help, frequently, very often, come to discuss their day-to-day familiar problems. So they are discussing things that are routine, these routines of life. The fact that they happen regularly makes them appear trivial, but the appearance is deceptive. They are not trivial because the things that occur every single day make up our lives. And the time spent adds up at an alarming rate. So the idea is, if you spend 45 minutes fighting with your child to go to bed every day, that is the equivalent of a month and a half of 40-hour work weeks, spent entirely in fighting with your child to get him to go to bed. This is not trivial. It is not trivial. It is having a big effect. So, main idea, the things we routinely do are extremely significant. My client was spending a month and a half of work weeks per year fighting ineffectually and miserably with his son. Needless to say, both were suffering for it. No matter how good your intentions or how sweet and tolerant your temperament, you will not maintain good relationships with someone you fight with for a month and a half of work weeks per year. Resentment will inevitably build. And even if it doesn't, all that wasted, unpleasant time could clearly be spent in more productive and useful and less stressful and more enjoyable activity. How are such situations to be understood? Where does the fault lie? In the child or in the parent? in nature or in society? And what, if anything, is to be done? So, this whole paragraph is reiterating the idea that the things you do routinely are not trivial. They have a huge impact. Both in this particular case of spending a month and a half fighting a year with his son, it will inevitably build resentment between the father and son. It will definitely cause a bad relationship. Both father and son are suffering. And why? Why would this happen? Why do people live this way? How can we understand it? Whose fault is it? The child or the parent? Nature or society? And what can be done? Next paragraph. Some localize all such problems in the adult. Okay, let me get my color change. I'll take orange. Some localize all such problems in the adult, whether in the parent or broader society. There are no bad children, such people think, only bad parents. When the idealized image of an unsullied child is brought to mind, this notion appears fully justified. The beauty, openness, joy, trust, and capacity for love characterizing children makes it easy to attribute full culpability to the adults on the scene. But, here we have our but, such an attitude is dangerously and naively romantic. It is too one-sided. In the case of parents granted a particularly difficult son or daughter. Okay, so it's too one-sided in the case of parents granted a particularly difficult son or daughter. It's also not for the best that all human corruption is uncritically laid at society's feet. That conclusion merely displaces the problem back in time. It explains nothing and solves no problems. If society is corrupt, but not the individuals within it, then where did the corruption originate? How is it propagated? It's a one-sided, deeply ideological theory. So the question is, whose fault is it when you have situations where everybody is being destroyed? Some people localize or put the blame on the adult, whether they're saying the parent is at fault or they're saying society is at fault. In any case, it is adults, not children, who are at fault. They say, these people say, there are no bad children, only bad parents. And then he conjures the image of the idealized, unsullied child. When you think of a perfect, unsullied child, you think this is maybe true. There are no bad children. It seems reasonable. The notion appears justified. And you think of the beauty, openness, joy, trust, and capacity for love that characterizes children. And this makes it easy to attribute the blame, the culpability, to the adults. But Jordan Peterson says this idea is dangerously naive and romantic, or dangerously and naively romantic. It's not really true. It's imaginary. It is too one-sided. It is a reductionist argument. In the case of parents granted a particularly difficult son or daughter, there are children who are just difficult. It is also, so this is in the case of parents, but also society. Not for the best that all human corruption is uncritically laid at society's feet. Without thought, we simply say, it's the society that's making all the trouble. Society teaching parents not to discipline. Society encouraging bad behavior through the TV and movies and all the media. The public school system, which is teaching children to disrespect their parents. Society. It's not for the best to blame society. That conclusion merely displaces the problem back in time, because society is made up of ordinary parents. Where did society get these bad ideas? These are people. These are parents. So, to say it is society explains nothing, solves no problems. It doesn't help. It doesn't explain it. It doesn't help. If society is corrupt, but not the individuals within it, where did the corruption originate? Obviously, if society is corrupt, the individuals in it are corrupt. How is it propagated? I.e., how is the corruption of society propagated? This idea that it's either the parent or society at fault is a one-sided, deeply ideological theory. By ideological, it means not based on observation and evidence, just based on theory. Okay, we are out of time. We're going to have to pick this up right in the middle of the argument next week. See you later.